All right.
We need a drum roll.
Bing. We're very impressed that there are still people in the room, but that's because what a great day. We had a lot of
I think
really,
it's because
really
there are drinks and we've locked the doors.
also that. Um, so, inspired by John, but not quite a cicada. Um, 2 years ago, when we did the last conference, I asked a question. I asked, how broad are Microsoft's shoulders? And I wondered aloud, if it gets litigated in all of these cases, is it going to come out smaller at the other end? Was it a perfect storm in terms of the evidence, the theory, the court, the moment in history, which also came up in discussions today? Um, and was it a good fit for its time? But it might it might come out a little bit smaller if it gets distinguished. The evidence not quite the same, or does it come out kind of reinvigorated and even larger? Um, and I wondered as I listened across the day, have we put too much weight on Microsoft, or are the shoulders big enough to carry it through these cases and appeal? Or like Eleanor said, does it get into the Supreme Court's hands and Gorsuch says, I still like my Novell decision and Trinco and the body language of Alston better? So that's my first thing. What do you got?
Gee, I don't know. That's good. So I'll respond to you first, which is we can't really avoid our children growing up. How's that? So I often say TGFM. Thank God for Microsoft, or else what would we have to talk about? And it will continue to evolve. So for those like Eleanor who are afraid, what's going to happen against the Supreme Court, who knows when it'll get to the Supreme Court? Who knows who the justices will be? I don't want to wish bad health on anybody, but it's possible. Things change. This court has changed. I think for the extreme worse, but it could change back to the less extreme worse. So who knows? And it will continue to be viewed through current day lenses, whatever it meant at the beginning. So I think that's great. It's organic, and in a sense, I'm looking at Daniel. So we want firm, exact things
Yeah,
about
he's
what this
organic,
case.
definitely.
Well, he's growing. No, well, anyway, firm, exact things that we want. But the plasticity, perhaps, of Microsoft or great cases is that they're not really set in stone, and there's much to talk about and interpret. And in some sense, that's what great texts are. So I'm less upset about that in a sense. I have my views. Andy has his views. We put them in a book. I don't want to plug the book, but
What book would that be?
I can't even remember. Doesn't have a catchy title anyway.
The Quest for Last?
the quest for second editions. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think so. But it will continue to evolve, and certainly what's made of it in courts of appeals, if it gets there, cases could settle. Cases do settle, even though we've heard very little about settlements in any of these cases. New folks are in town, and we don't really know the
And
back
that's
heel.
how Microsoft settled.
Right.
New folks in town.
Right.
All right, here's my second one. And actually, I was going to ask Avi when he was up on the panel, but I'll ask it to everyone. This one is the innovator's dilemma question. I don't think any of the companies we call big tech are today the same as they were 5 or 7 or 10 years ago. And maybe they've learned the lesson of the innovator's dilemma, and they are changing. They are constantly changing. So here's the question. Is the remedy we haven't thought of something they're already thinking about themselves, which is the next iteration of themselves? Or are they just going to dig in like monopolists of the past and defend what they have? What do you think?
Yes, I do. What about, yes, I do. Yeah, that's a nice softball. The problem, and Fiona said this, the problem with new things and innovation is that who knows what they are. So we can't, I mean, my ability to predict things or to imagine things, I've realized recently, is so limited because people in power are doing things I never would have thought possible. So how am I supposed to predict exactly what's on the mind or the collective mind of any of these major corporations? We can see what's being reported. We can, good, careful observation. The more we know, the more we know. We can see the things we see. So we see cloud computing. We see AI, but who knows what we don't see. So, the antitrust response, I think, has always been, well, we don't know, but, let's structure it so things are as open as possible. And if that's what we mean by competition and competitiveness, that's what the goal of this law is supposed to do. And who knows how, what that's going to be, which is, I guess it's good. I don't know because I don't know what it's going to be. Okay, over to you, Andy.
The future is tough to predict.
Right.
The reason I wanted to ask Avi the question is because
He's Canadian.
he's
Oh.
Canadian, so he knows the answer. But he's not Daniel, so he can't deliver it with that really cool.
Yeah. I guess
voice,
he gets very far on that accent, and his ideas, but.
A couple of the points that Avi made is what made me start thinking about this, is that AI has developed in different ways, with different business models, in different sectors. We keep thinking of it, I think, in a very homogeneous, divisible way. But AI is everywhere in various kinds of industries, and I wonder if that means there are changes and remedies that are, in essence, evolving that we're not seeing, that we're not even looking for, because we're looking, necessarily law is backward looking, and then we come to the remedy and we want it to be forward looking, which is something that Judge Kohler-Catelli wanted it to be. But maybe the forward looking changes are all around us too. And it's not possible for a judge to really understand all that, although it's very interesting that this judge said, I want to be hearing about AI during the remedy phase. And we wondered, how is that going to cut? Which way is that going to cut? Does it cut, we limit Google's ability to do it because it's the next thing? Or is it so obviously a challenge to Google that you take into account in a different way?
Yeah, so you don't do anything and let the that's one answer, I guess. You just let the market work. But you want to be sure that Google can't engage in strategies that will strangle it. So I think I heard someone say, we have no idea how to regulate AI, but we do have some idea of how to regulate markets. Openness, try to get more competitors rather than fewer. And, this is what drives one poor district court judge to distraction and modesty, saying, holy moly, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be in charge of this. So, we can sit up here and think of great, sort of broad policies, but these judges in these cases are going to have to do something, and, they don't want everything to fall on them.
So speaking of district court judges, we'll wrap up with a little Harry and Andy story. Long after the Microsoft trial was done, we asked to have lunch with Judge Jackson. And he did have lunch with us. And he's kind of a grumpy guy in person. And he had a big,
by that time, certainly,
gravelly voice. And the conversation wasn't going well. He had some scars from the days of the case. So I thought I'd ask a softball question. And I asked the judge, I said, so what are you working on now that's interesting, Judge? And he looked at me and said, not a goddamn thing. And I was, Okay. We paid the bill, and that was the end of our lunch with Judge Jackson. So
I
this
was-
is the end of our.
But I thought you wait. I thought you were going to tell the other part of the story,
Well, you could
which
tell
was
the
the
other part.
yeah. So we were in talking about the remedy. He said one thing he didn't want to be was in charge of this industry because he didn't want to be Judge Green. So Judge Green had chambers next to Judge Jackson, and he said, with complete seriousness, as I recall, having to oversee that decree killed him, literally. I mean,
Judge
not
Green.
Judge Green. And he said, I don't remember if he said, I don't want to die, but that was certainly the implication. He wasn't going to do something. And he meant this very seriously, that this was a burden that he felt, in fact, killed him. So maybe it's not just modesty, but trying to be careful for health, that judges avoid these things.
Self-care.
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 And one final thing, that if you want to take away anything from this conference, it's insect lore. So we had cicadas, or is it cicadas? I don't know. And
Apparently, they're not going to take away the little epic things. They're all over the place.
and mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes.
Be careful of mosquitoes in sleeping bags. So, things to remember. Thank you, Andy, for your effort.
Thank you,
in this.
Harry.
And we'll see you before 15 years.